Les Misérables, colloquially known in English-speaking countries as Les Mis or Les Mis, is a sung-through musical based on the novel Les Misérables by French poet and novelist Victor Hugo. It has music by Claude Michel Schonberg, original French lyrics by Alain Boublil and Jean-Marc Natel, with an English-language libretto by Herbert Kretzmer. The London production has run continuously since October 1985, the second longest-running musical in the world. It is the longest-running musical in the West End. Set in early 19th century France, it is the story of Jean Valjean, a French peasant, and his quest for redemption after serving 19 years in jail for having stolen a loaf of bread for his sister's starving child. Valjean decides to break his parole and start his life anew after a kindly bishop inspires him by a tremendous act of mercy. But he is relentlessly tracked down by a police inspector named Javert. Along the way, Valjean and a slew of characters are swept into a revolutionary period in France, where a group of young idealists make their last stand at a street barricade. Background: originally released as a French-language concept album, the first musical stage adaptation of Les Misérables was presented at the Palais des Sports in 1980. However, the production closed after 3 months when the booking contract expired. In 1983, about 6 months after producer Cameron Mackintosh had opened Cats on Broadway, he received a copy of the French concept album from director Peter Farago. Farago had been impressed by the work and asked Mackintosh to produce an English-language version of the show. Initially reluctant, Mackintosh eventually agreed. Mackintosh, in conjunction with the Royal Shakespeare Company, assembled a production team to adapt the French musical for a British audience. After 2 years in development, the English-language version opened in London on 8 October 1985, by the Royal Shakespeare Company at the Barbican Centre, then the London home of the RSC. The success of the West End musical led to a Broadway production. Reception: at the opening of the London production, critical reviews were negative. The Sunday Telegraph's Francis King described the show as a lurid Victorian melodrama produced with Victorian lavishness, and Michael Ratcliffe in The Observer dubbed the show a witless and synthetic entertainment. While literary scholars condemned the project for converting classic literature into a musical, public opinion differed. The box office received record orders. The 3-month engagement sold out, and reviews improved. The London production has run continuously since October 1985, the second longest-running musical in the world after The Fantastics, the second longest-running West End show after The Mousetrap. It is the longest-running musical in the West End, followed by The Phantom of the Opera. In 2010, it played its 10,000th performance in London, at Queen's Theatre. On 3 October 2010, the show celebrated its 25th anniversary with 3 productions running in London. The original production at the Queen's Theatre, the 25th anniversary touring production at its 1985 tryout venue, the Barbican Centre, and the 25th anniversary concert at London's O2 Arena. The Broadway production opened 12 March 1987 and ran until 18 May 2003, closing after 6,680 performances. It is the 5th longest-running Broadway show in history and was the second longest at the time. The show was nominated for 12 Tony Awards and won 8, including Best Musical and Best Original Score. Subsequently, numerous tours and international and regional productions have been staged, as well as concert and broadcast productions. Several recordings have also been made. A Broadway revival opened in 2006 at the Broadhurst Theatre and closed in 2008. And a second Broadway revival opened in 2014 and is currently running at the Imperial Theatre. The show was placed first in a BBC Radio 2 listener poll of Britain's #1 essential musicals in 2005, receiving more than 40% of the votes. A film version directed by Tom Hooper was released at the end of 2012 to generally positive reviews as well as numerous awards nominations, winning 3 Academy Awards, 3 Golden Globe Awards and 4 British Academy Film Awards. Emblem. The musical's emblem is a picture of the waif Cosette sweeping the Thénardiers in, usually shown cropped to a head and shoulders portrait superimposed on the French flag. The image is based on an etching by Gustave Brion based on the drawing by Émile Bayard. It appeared in several of the novel's earliest French-language editions. Synopsis. Act 1. In Bagnères prison in Toulon, France, in 1815, the prisoners work at hard labor. After 19 years in prison, Jean Valjean, prisoner 24601, is released on parole by the policeman Javert. By law, Valjean must display a yellow ticket of leave, which identifies him as an ex-convict. As a convict, Valjean is shunned wherever he goes and cannot find regular work or lodging, but the Bishop of Dinan offers him food and shelter. Desperate and embittered, Valjean steals the bishop's silver and flees. He is captured by the police, but rather than turn him in, the bishop lies and tells the police that the silver was a gift, giving Valjean a pair of silver candlesticks in addition. The bishop tells Valjean that he must use the silver to become an honest man, and that he has bought soul for God. Ashamed and humbled by the bishop's kindness, Valjean resolves to redeem his sins. He tears up his yellow ticket, breaking his parole but giving himself a chance to start a new life free from the stigma of his criminal past. 8 years later, Valjean has assumed a new identity as Monsieur Madeleine, a wealthy factory owner and mayor of Montreuil-sur-Mer. Fantine is a single mother working in his factory, trying to support her daughter Cosette, who is being raised by an innkeeper and his wife while Fantine labors in the city. Unbeknownst to Valjean, the factory foreman lusts after Fantine, and when she rejects his advances he takes it out on the other workers, who resent her for it. One day a co-worker steals a letter about Cosette from Fantine, revealing to the other workers that Fantine has a child. A fight breaks out, and the foreman uses the incident as a pretense to fire Fantine. Fantine reflects on her broken dreams and about Cosette's father, who abandoned him both. Desperate for money, she sells her locket and hair, finally becoming a prostitute. When she fights back against an abusive customer, Bamatabois, Javert, now a police inspector stationed in Montreuil-sur-Mer, arrives to arrest her. But Valjean, passing by the scene, pities Fantine, and when he realizes she once worked for him and that she blames him for her misfortune, he is guilt-stricken. He orders Javert release her before taking her to a hospital. Soon afterwards, Valjean rescues a man pinned by a runaway cart. Javert, who has up until now not recognized Valjean, though he has pursued him as a fugitive all these years, witnesses the incident and becomes suspicious, remembering the incredible strength Valjean displayed in the work camp. But it turns out another man has been arrested, and is about to go to trial for breaking parole. The real Valjean realizes that this case of mistaken identity could free him forever. But he's not willing to see an innocent man go to prison in his place and so confesses his identity to the court. At the hospital, a delirious Fantine dreams of Cosette. Valjean promises to find Cosette and protect her. Relieved, Fantine succumbs to her illness and dies. Javert arrives to take Valjean back into custody, but Valjean asks Javert for time to fetch Cosette. Javert refuses, insisting that a criminal like Valjean can never change or do good. They struggle, but Valjean overpowers Javert and escapes. In Montfermeil, the duplicitous innkeepers, the Thénardiers, use Cosette as a servant while extorting money from Fantine by claiming that Cosette is seriously ill, all the while indulging their own daughter. Eponine. Cosette dreams of a life where she is not forced to work and is treated lovingly. The Thénardiers cheat their customers and live a life of criminal depravity. Valjean meets Cosette while she's on an errand drawing water and offers the Thénardiers payment to adopt her. The Thénardiers feign concern for Cosette and bargain with Valjean, who pays them 1,500 francs in the end. Valjean and Cosette leave for Paris. 9 years later, in 1832, Paris is in upheaval because of the impending death of General Lamarck, the only man in the government who shows mercy to the poor. Among those mingling in the streets are the student revolutionaries Marius Pontmercy and Enjolras, who contemplate the effect Lamarck's death will have on the poor and desperate in Paris. The Thénardiers, who have since lost their inn and now run a street gang, the daughter Eponine, who is now grown and has fallen in love with Marius, and the streetwise young urchin Gavroche, who knows everything that happens in the slums. The Thénardiers prepare to con some charitable visitors, who turn out to be Valjean and Cosette, who has grown into a beautiful young woman. While the gang bamboozles her father, Cosette runs into Marius, and the pair fall in love at first sight. Thénardier suddenly recognizes Valjean, but before they can finish the robbery, Javert, now an inspector stationed here in Paris, comes to the rescue. Valjean and Cosette escape, and only later does Javert suspect who they were. Javert makes a vow to the stars that he will find Valjean and recapture him. Meanwhile, Marius persuades Eponine to help him find Cosette. At a small café, Enjolras exhorts a group of idealistic students to prepare for revolution. Marius interrupts the serious atmosphere by fantasizing about his newfound love, much to the amusement of his compatriots, particularly the wine-loving Grantaire. When Gavroche brings the news of General Lamarck's death, the students realize that they can use the public's dismay to incite their revolution and that their time has come. At Valjean's house, Cosette thinks about her chance meeting with Marius and later confronts Valjean about the secrets he keeps about his and her own past. Eponine leads Marius to Valjean's house, and he and Cosette meet again and confess their mutual love. Thénardier and his gang arrive, intending to rob Valjean's house, but Eponine stops them by screaming a warning. The scream alerts Valjean, who believes that the intruders were sent by Javert to ferret out his cover. He tells Cosette that it's time once again for them to go on the run. On the eve of the 1832 Paris uprising, Valjean prepares to go into exile. Cosette and Marius part in despair. Eponine mourns her unrequited love for Marius. Enjolras encourages all of Paris to join the revolution as he and the other students prepare for battle. Marius is conflicted whether to follow Cosette or join the uprising. Javert reveals his plans to spy on the students, and the Thénardiers scheme to profit off the coming violence. Marius decides to stand with his friends, and all anticipate what the dawn will bring. Act 2. As the students build a barricade to serve as their rally point, Javert, disguised as a rebel, volunteers to spy on the government troops. Marius discovers that Eponine has disguised herself as a boy to join the rebels and sends her to deliver a farewell letter to Cosette. Valjean intercepts the letter and learns about Marius and Cosette's romance. Eponine walks the streets of Paris alone, imagining that Marius is there with her, but laments that her love for Marius will never be reciprocated. The French army arrives at the barricade and demands that the students surrender. Though Javert tells the students that the government will not attack that night, Gavroche exposes him as a spy, and the students detain him. Eponine returns to find Marius but is shot by the soldiers crossing the barricade. As Marius holds her, she assures him that she feels no pain and reveals her love for him before dying in his arms. The students mourn this first loss of life at the barricades and resolve to fight in her name, and they carry her body away while Enjolras attempts to comfort Marius, who is heartbroken over Eponine's death. Valjean arrives at the barricade, crossing the government lines disguised as a soldier, hoping that he might somehow protect Marius in the coming battle for Cosette's sake. In return, he asks Enjolras to be the one to execute the imprisoned Javert, which Enjolras grants. But as soon as Valjean and Javert are alone, Valjean frees Javert. Javert warns Valjean that he will not give up his pursuit and rejects what he perceives as a bargain for Valjean's freedom. Valjean says there are no conditions to his release, and holds no ill will toward Javert for doing his duty. The students settle down for the night and reminisce about the past while also expressing anxiety about the battle to come. Enjolras tells the other students to stay awake in case the enemy strikes unexpectedly in the night, but he tells Marius to get some sleep. Grantaire gets angry and asks Marius if he fears to die, as Marius wonders if Cosette will remember him if he dies. As Marius sleeps, Valjean prays to God to protect Marius, even at the cost of his own life. As dawn approaches, Enjolras realizes that the people of Paris have not risen up with them, but resolves to fight on in spite of the impossible odds. The army gives a final warning, but the rebels fight to the last man, with Enjolras exhorting, "Let others rise to take our place until the earth is free." Everyone at the barricade is killed except Valjean and a gravely wounded Marius, who escape into the sewers. Javert returns to the barricade, searching for Valjean amongst the bodies, and finds the open sewer grating. Valjean carries Marius through the sewers but collapses in exhaustion. While he is unconscious, Thénardier, who has been looting bodies, comes upon him and takes the ring from the unconscious Marius, but flees when Valjean regains consciousness. When Valjean carries Marius to the sewer's exit, he finds Javert waiting for him. Valjean begs Javert for 1 hour to bring Marius to a doctor, and Javert reluctantly agrees. Javert finds himself unable to reconcile Valjean's merciful acts with his conception of Valjean as an irredeemable criminal, refusing to compromise his principles but no longer able to hold them sacred. He finds himself torn between God and the law and commits suicide by throwing himself into the Seine. In the wake of the failed revolution, women mourn the deaths of the students, and Marius, wounded but alive, despairs at the sacrifice of so many lives. As he wonders who saved his own life, Cosette comforts him and they reaffirm their blossoming romance. Valjean realizes that Cosette will not need him as a caretaker once she's married and gives them his blessing. Valjean confesses to Marius that he is an escaped convict and must go away because his presence endangers Cosette, making Marius promise never to tell Cosette. A few months later, Marius and Cosette marry. The Thénardiers crash the reception in disguise and attempt to blackmail Marius, telling him that Valjean is a murderer and that Thénardier saw him carrying a corpse in the sewers after the barricades fell. When Thénardier shows him the ring as proof, Marius realizes that it was Valjean who saved his life. The newlyweds leave to find Valjean. The Thénardiers are not discouraged, instead gloating that their craven practicality has saved their lives time and time again. At a convent, Valjean awaits his death, having nothing left to live for. The spirit of Fantine appears to him and tells him that he has been forgiven and will soon be with God. Cosette and Marius arrive to find Valjean near death. Valjean thanks God for letting him live long enough to see Cosette again, and Marius thanks him for saving his life. Valjean gives Cosette a letter confessing his troubled past and the truth about her mother. As he dies, the spirits of Fantine and Apolline guide him to heaven, reminding him that to love another person is to see the face of God. They are joined by the spirits of those who died at the barricades, who sing that in the next world God lays low all tyranny and frees all oppressed people from their shackles. Musical numbers. Characters.